Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that those of you sitting in the back of the room move closer to the front so that you may participate in the debates. Again, please move to the front of the room so that you might participate in the debates. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. There we go. Lights up, music off. We're ready to go. What a great follow-up to Joseph Sotomayor to see everybody back here again. My name is Kevin Kruger. I'm the president of NASPA, and I'd like to welcome you to Higher Ed Live's presentation of contested issues in student affairs live debates. Student Affairs Live co-hosts Heather Shea and Tony Duty will moderate a 6-minute fast-paced 8-minute one-on-one debates between legendary thought leaders in student affairs. This is going to be fun. Some of you are legendary. Do you know that? These debates are inspired from the work of Peter Magolda and Marcia Baxter Magolda's book, Contested Issues in Student Affairs, and will provide a lively and engaging space for multiple perspectives on controversial topics. I'm really glad we have this here. Tony and Heather brought this idea to bring this to the NASPA conference. They've been doing it at ACPA, and we're really thrilled to have this here as part of our 100-year conference. I know we have people watching from their campuses in rooms as part of our virtual ticket, so welcome, and hope you enjoy this live broadcast. Thanks to Heather and Tony again for bringing this. And I'd like to introduce Matt Ferguson, who is going to kick off the program. So thanks very much. Enjoy.
Hello there, Student Affairs fans. It's Monday, March 5th, and this is a very special edition of Higher Ed Live, the online learning community for professionals in higher education. As you heard, my name is Matthew Ferguson. I'm going to be your MC for today, and we are broadcasting live from the NASPA conference in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with the 4th ever Contested Issues live debates. Philadelphia attendees, let your colleagues, friends, and family know that they can tune into our live stream now at watch.higheredlive.com. You can participate in the learning community as well by following along on Twitter and tweeting using the Higher Ed Live hashtag. At this time, I would like to introduce your hosts of Higher Ed Live and your moderators for today's debates. First up, originally from Parker, Colorado, currently a student affairs administrator and doctoral candidate at Michigan State University, earned her master's in student affairs from Colorado State, an uber Harry Potter fan, and showing her fandom by wearing Deathly Hallows earrings on stage today. Please welcome Heather Shea. And next up, from the shopping mall capital of the world, Paramus, New Jersey, Currently serves as the Senior Director for Student Engagement at Rutgers University. Holds a Master's in Student Affairs, a Bachelor's in Management. Loves salsa, merengue, snowboarding, and was an International Olympics of the Mind champion. Please welcome Tony Duty.
Thank you, Matt. I know it's hard to believe I was an Olympics of the Mind champion. We are excited to share with you today what we hope will be a fun-filled, spirited conversation. You know, Heather, as I thought about it, Matt has been helping us out for years now, introducing other people, but we have never actually introduced you, Matt. So this is Matthew Ferguson. He is originally from South Jersey, a stone's skip away from Philadelphia. Matt was our former New Student Orientation Director at Rutgers University and is currently the Senior Learning Manager at Amazon headquarters in Seattle, Washington. Matt is infamous for organizing and leading not one, but 2 Guinness Book of World Records. One, I believe, was most people dressed as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the other was most people dressed as Where's Waldo. Matt aspires one day to open up and operate his own miniature golf course.
It's true.
So for those of you who don't know, Hired Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communication firm that works on branding strategies, web design, and more. You can go to mstoner.com to learn more about what they do. Now, Heather and I have been working collaboratively for the last 3 years producing content for Higher Ed Live. And over the last year alone, we have produced over 32 episodes that have been organized around current and timely issues. We're really proud of the fact we have over 500 views per episode, or almost 500 views per episode, in virtually every 162 countries from around the world. If you want to check out, they are free. You can visit the archives at higheredlive.com. Now, you should know that we have had over 100 guests over the last year, probably a few faces that you might recognize. And we've been really fortunate to have opportunities to work with and learn from some of the top thought leaders and scholars in the industry.
If you tune in regularly, you might want to know how we go about selecting both our panelists as well as our topics. And Tony and I can attest that it's a complicated process that often takes place in a relatively short time frame. For this and all of our episodes of Student Affairs Live, we aim to represent individuals who encompass many identities and perspectives, who also can speak expertly on timely topics, and also who are interested and available in appearing live on TV, essentially. We are so grateful to the 12 individuals here today who have joined us on this stage for the Contested Issues debates. As Kevin mentioned, we are grateful to Dr. Peter Magolda and Dr. Marcia Baxter Magolda for allowing us to use the Contested Issues name for this session, and we hope the spirited debate on stage pays tribute to their lasting legacies as scholars and thought leaders. Contested Issues is a session, as Kevin also said, that we have done a couple of times at ACPA and also at a regional conference, and we wanted others to benefit from this as well. So we are so grateful to NASPA leadership for allowing us to be on the stage here today. One last point, that if you are interested in participating, if you have an idea, a suggestion, feedback for us, we are tweeting out right now our email addresses, and we will look forward to receiving your feedback and comments as well. So I think we're ready to get started.
We certainly are. Why don't you both grab your seats? Debate. It can be a scary word, especially if you own a television these days. But it has been a form of civilized discourse around the world for hundreds of years, with some records dating even back to ancient Greece. Some of the most important debates for the founding of this country happened just a few hundred yards away from here in the building that today we call Independence Hall. Now, today, the debate format will be used to deliver different perspectives in an engaging way with the hope of creating even more dialogue on some of these hot topics in our field. Today's guests have prepared that with that mindset and a commitment to collegiality in mind. We also want to state that we've asked them to clearly take a side, and some of these perspectives may not reflect their own views. Now, our format today is simple. Each guest will deliver a 60-second opening statement. After that, each side will have 60 seconds to answer a question from our moderators. I will then pose a crowdsourced question to one of the sides, allowing for a 45-second answer followed by a 45-second response, and we'll bring it home with a 30-second closing statement from each guest. I will remind our guests that there are time limits in place to keep the show moving, and yes, Ed Cabellin, the rules apply to you as well. When you hear this bell, please conclude the current thought as quickly as possible. At that point, you, the audience, will help us choose a winner. For those of you here up front, you'll notice there's some cards on your chair, a red and a blue card. What I'm going to do is, when prompted, ask you to raise a red card or a blue card for who you felt presented the most compelling argument and who won the debate ultimately. The winner will get ultimate bragging rights until NASPA 2019 in Los Angeles, and I'm told a lunch on NASPA President Kevin Kruger, although I have not been authorized to offer that as a prize. Okay, Higher Ed Live viewers and NASPA attendees, are we ready for a great debate? Our first topic: should campuses regulate free speech? Let's meet our guests for this debate. On one side of the debate, one of just 500 folks to call Charter Oaks, Iowa home. He's a proud University of Minnesota Golden Gopher, a Concordia, Nebraska Bulldog, and a Charter Oak Ute Bobcat. Currently serving as the chair of the Department of Educational Leadership and a director of the EDD program at Cal State Fullerton, a lifelong Minnesota Vikings fan that is concerned he may not show up for the big competition here in Philly. And rumor has it he's trying to bribe his opponent with the secret recipe for Iowa's own Templeton Rye whiskey. Let's hear it for John Hoffman. And on the opposing side, originally calling the windy city of Chicago home, earned a doctorate in education at DePaul after a master's in history at UC San Diego, currently serving as the dean of students at Cornell University, a dad to 2 awesome girls, an avid 90s hip-hop fan, and was reading fantasy fiction way before it was cool. Please welcome Vihey Pendekar. All right, take it away, Heather.
Have a seat. Have a seat. All right, we are ready to get started with our first topic. John, you are speaking about your belief that campuses should not regulate free speech. And you have 60 seconds to make an opening statement, which begins now.
So to clarify, my job is to advocate for the current practice, the current law as related to free speech on campus. That involves regulating unprotected speech. That's things such as inciting violence, the heckler's veto, and harassment. Let me also be clear. I'm not advocating for neutrality here. Free speech itself is a value, and our job as student affairs educators is to be proactive in engaging in work that is socially just, equitable, and inclusive. In fact, I would tell you that I believe our problem is less with the institution of free speech. It is more often the case that it's with institutions, colleges, and universities that fail to proactively engage in just, equitable, and inclusive educational practices.
All right, your opening statement as well, belief that we should be regulating speech.
So one of the axioms you'll hear on college campuses all the time is that free speech is a central value in American higher education, and that we must meet speech that we find disagreeable with more speech. The problem with this argument is that free speech, as it's posited today, is both power blind and decontextualized. So let's name the power and let's name the context. Right now, students who want to bring provocative conservative or alt-right speakers to our campuses are equipped with national networks that guide them with funding and strategy and consultation. So not all ideas are equal right now. And by being power blind and decontextualized, we're pretending that all ideas are equal, and that I think is dangerous. The second thing I want to offer is that campuses can engage in an educational frame in managing free speech rather than a legal frame. And an educational frame would allow us to take into account the speaker's intent rather than just looking at all speech as equal. And so conservatives that aim to educate and use facts to advance a worldview would be seen as different than Milo or Ann Coulter, who actually seek to harm.
Okay, great. So now I have a question for each of you. Your question, I know that the University of Florida estimated that they spent at least $600,000 and UC Berkeley dropped $800,000 to address security issues related to alt-right speakers, Richard Spencer and Milo. Kevin Kruger, in fact, said that institutions now face a new budgetary question. How do they pay for both their core educational mission as well as this new expense of protecting their campus? Should students be paying the cost of free speech?
Great question. So let me begin by saying I believe that the alt-right is appropriating and hijacking free speech. Free speech is not an alt-right value. And given the opportunity, the alt-right would be very happy to limit the speech of students who would engage in nonviolent protest on our campuses. So we have to accept the speech for what it is. We have tools on our campus. We do not have to protect the heckler's veto. When a speaker demands inordinate cost in order for us to provide security on campus for that individual to speak, that is, in a sense, a heckler's veto that it's drawing dollars away from other educational practices that we would promote. We can use time, place, and manner to manage this. It may be that some of these need to be moved off campus or online in order to minimize those costs.
Great, thanks so much. Yes, my question for you is, this seems like somewhat of a slippery slope for institutions. Who then is the individual at the institution who's responsible for evaluating an outside organization's mission to determine if it's harmful or not? And wouldn't that individual's beliefs and prejudices inform their decision?
Well, the easy answer to your question is that you just let your dean of students decide. But if you want to use something more elaborate, I think that higher education is replete with examples of boards or hearing boards or committees, a lot of committees, that can actually look at this contextually, right? We are educators and we have disciplinary expertise in so many different areas that can help us take an organization and look at a controversial speaker, look at their track record, their social media presence, and actually say, is their intent to educate based on facts and to provide a healthy civic exchange, which we say is at the heart of the American educational project, or is their intent to polarize, divide, and harm through the use of fake news and polemics? And we can make decisions, and we do this all the time in our conduct processes where we take time, place, and manner into account because we're using an educational frame rather than a legalistic frame. Right? And so I think that we actually have the blueprint there, and we just need to get muddy and get involved and roll our sleeves up.
Great, great. I think we have a question from the audience.
We do, and you'll both get an opportunity to answer this. We'll start with you, John. What are each of your views on speech codes? In a recent class, read a law text that most or all speech codes are unenforceable and won't hold up in a court of law. How does either having or not having codes on campus help make your position, being that they're unenforceable?
It's a great point. The Supreme Court, and we've just heard from one of our justices, when the Supreme Court has ruled on these types of cases, it has not typically been in split decisions. It has been by and large 8-1, 9-0 types of decisions that have come from the Supreme Court, suggesting, as was stated just an hour ago, that we need to have spaces for folks to listen and to engage with one another. There may, as it was discussed last night, there may be no debating or dialoguing with the alt-right. But if we start considering students, for example, who are on the right, who may be influenced by the alt-right, they also may be influenced by dialogue that we can facilitate in our classrooms in educative manners.
All right, Vijay, same question to you. Unenforceable codes. How does it play into your argument?
I think that for me, I'm uncomfortable with speech codes because they are power blind and decontextualized the same way that unmitigated free speech is problematic. And so the case I always think about is in the University of Michigan, students actually managed to pass a speech code in the 1980s. And the data, the speech codes lasted about a year, and there was about 24 students brought up in violation of the speech code. And the speech code was passed by progressive activists. And the 24 students brought up in violation of the speech codes were almost all students of color and minoritized and marginalized group members. And the only student that it stuck with and was actually punished was an African American student who was brought up in terms of the way that they used language around racism as violating other people's rights. And so I'm really uncomfortable with speech codes, and I don't think they take power and context into play.
Great, thanks. You each now have 30 seconds to make a closing statement, and go to you first.
So early in my career, I worked for 5 years as a dean of students at an institution that suppressed speech on the basis of its religious values. I think we have to consider that. I saw the harm that was done to students. If we look at history, the regulation of speech has, throughout the years, done more to limit progressive ideals than to promote them. I think we have to acknowledge this and utilize the best of what free speech has to offer in order to promote just, equitable, inclusive education.
All right, thanks. Your closing statement?
I think that the debate over free speech in higher education right now is better framed as a debate over the purpose of higher education, as that seems to be up in the air on a number of levels. And what it means to educate a citizenry to participate meaningfully in a democracy is a better question. And I think that by not setting any boundaries around the intent, around how we manage people's emotional safety and emotional harm, we actually really set up a slippery slope into campuses that become a recreation of our national model where people feel deeply marginalized and invisible.
Right. Excellent, Matt.
All right, it's now time for our audience to decide. We're going to bring the lights up a little bit. If you think that John had the compelling argument, hold up your red card. And if you think Vijay had the compelling argument, hold up your blue card.
I'm buying. Oh, no.
All right, I think we overwhelmingly are going to award it to Vijay.
Congratulations.
How about a big round of applause for both of our debaters?
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Our next topic, do big-time sports belong on college campuses? Let's meet our guests for this debate. On one side of the debate, currently calling Boston, Massachusetts home, educated in Brooklyn and the city by folks in rural South Carolina and within Brown, Boston University, and the New England law communities, currently serving as the Associate Provost and Dean of Students at Boston University. Temperamentally, he's an artist that ended up at law school who enjoys reading poetry and constantly rocking the boat. He's the one your parents cautioned you about, but is a hoot and a half to hang out with. Please welcome Ken Elmore. And on the opposing side, a transplanted Houstonian, currently living in Evanston, Illinois. She earned her PhD from Indiana State University after a stint for a bachelor's and master's at Texas A&M. Currently serves as the Associate Vice President and Chief of Staff for Student Affairs at Northwestern University, a self-proscribed theater junkie that can sing every word in Hamilton and Dear Evan Hansen from memory, but finds a balance with a heavy dose of The Walking Dead. Please welcome Julie Payne Kirchmeier. All right, take it away, Tony.
All right, I can actually attest to having hung out with you both that you are, in fact, a hoot to hang out with. So, Ken, you have the opening argument. 60 seconds on the clock begins now.
All right, so my issue is not so much with sports in general, but big-time sports. You're probably like me. Next week, we're going to be part of the criticism and we're going to be part of the problem because we know what happens next week. The biggest blaxploitation movie around, it's called March Madness, and that's what's going to happen. We are going to do the sorts of things that are absolutely antithetical to what college and university life is supposed to be about. Those people who will play basketball, those women and men, our sisters and brothers next week who'll play basketball, probably haven't studied abroad, probably haven't been able to have control of the organizations that they want to be a part of other than athletic sorts of stuff. Those folks have not had internships. They are going to be ill-equipped for job markets. These are going to be people who we all emulate in terms of our program. So the big time's got to come out of sports. I'm all for sports, but big time sports, let's get for real.
Wow. You just jammed 3 minutes worth of material into a minute. All right, you got your work cut out for you. Yeah.
All right.
All right, Julie, you've got 60 seconds on the clock. Your time begins now.
All right. While I hear everything you're saying, Ken, and I agree with a vast majority of it, I don't think we should be throwing the babies out with the bathwater, the bathtub, and the entire plumbing system when there's a lot of value that big-time college sports in particular do bring to athletics and to colleges and university. They provide a conduit for access and opportunity for so many of our students. Divisions I and Division II athletics brought in $2.9 billion in scholarships for 150,000 students, and it takes big-time sports to make that happen. They have direct tie to institution service mission through volunteer activities and outreach conducted by student athletes, coaches, and the programs themselves, which positively impacts those town-gown relationships. Student athletes do benefit from participation in the sports, including big-time sports, in two ways. One is going to be those valuable cognitive and leadership skills that we know we get from team activities. And the other is going to be that they actually do get trained in industry, because the sports and entertainment industry is a billion-dollar industry, and it encompasses a number of different avenues, not just playing sports.
You can't believe that stuff, Julie.
I can.
All right.
All right, Ken, first question goes to you. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The recent Olympics demonstrate that sport can be incredibly powerful in unifying people from different backgrounds, cultures, and identities. I think you might agree that big-time sports can have a positive effect on developing a sense of institutional pride, increasing donations and sponsorships, and increasing national and regional exposure. So if it's not big-time sports, what is it that you could suggest that could replace it, that could have the same kind of large-scale impact?
We would be really remiss as human beings if we can't find other ways that we can come together. We come together around our religion. We come together around our beliefs. We come together around a whole lot of things that we're passionate about. So there will be no shortage of ways that human beings will come together to be able to have points of pride, to be able to contribute to each other. You know, I even am wondering if the unity that we think we get from sport is really all marketing. I wonder if that's really what it's about. And most of the people at our colleges and universities who are going to games, it's not packed full of the people in the community, those students and faculty. These things are packed full of all kinds of other folks who might be in and around the place. Now, look, I'm from the Northeast, and we think we get it right. And we also think we have other things to do other than sports. And so I can understand why people think that sports are real unifiers. And I even think the unifying nature of the Olympics is really false and manufactured in and of itself. And I bet you all agree.
All right, Julie, you brought up that it brought in $2.9 billion in income. But a recent USA Today article reported that the 50 institutions with the highest athletic subsidies, student fees supporting athletics, average more than 44% more Pell Grant recipients than the 50 institutions with the lowest subsidies. Right. So as students struggle to pay for books, to deal with food insecurities, the increasing post-college debt, how can we ask them to foot the bill for something unrelated to the primary mission of an academic education?
So a couple thoughts here. Thanks for that question. Number one, the statistics about Pell Grant, spot on, but I think all of us would agree that work with students who receive Pell Grant, if we were to remove all those Pell Grants and redistribute them, it is still not enough to cover the cost of higher education right now. And when you also go back to the big time sports, so when you have, and understand when we talk about big time sports, and I think Ken will agree with this, we're really talking about men's basketball and we're talking about men's football at D1 FBS institutions, all right? So if some hockey, some baseball, we'll give you that BU, you're all right. So when you think about the amount of money that is brought in, not just for athletics, because of the affinity and the pride that comes with aligning with sport associated with institutions and the donations that come in, those offset additional scholarships as well. So if we pull big time sports, we redistribute Pell Grant, we will not have those dollars coming in to cover the cost of higher education for a number of students that aren't even affiliated with team sports right now. And that's a danger.
Okay, we got a good one, and you'll both get 45 seconds for this. We'll start with you, Ken. If an amateur league was created and a college could buy a franchise and license the school's name and logos for a fee, would that still work or not work within your argument?
I think that would be an awesome thing to do. That is the sane and sensible thing to do. We should probably just sell our names out for this. It would be better than exploiting people who come to a place to start as students. We call them student athletes. Well, not so much. I think that's a really good way to do it. If we're really about the money, by the way, about the money on another thing, the NCAA is about to make $900 million, almost $1 billion in the next few weeks. Pales in comparison. I think the other thing too is the NCAA should contribute to colleges and universities franchising their names out to get a portion of that money, if that's what we're really going to be talking about here. So yes, great idea. We should be doing that.
Your response?
Okay, had to make sure that clock started. So I want to go back to something that you just said a minute ago, which is the NCAA should be contributing back. What I'm hearing you say there is that there is a way to fix some of the issues that you're outlining while not eliminating big time sports at colleges and universities. That as we start to look at where are the deeper seated issues, and we could go into a number of deeper seated issues when it comes to college athletics, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that, but we've got to get into what the issues are and work together to fix them. As for the question, and is that an appropriate way to handle it? It could be, but I think, again, we've got to dive into it, not at the expense of the value that college sports brings to a university or a college environment.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up in a bow. You've got 30 seconds for your closing remarks, Ken.
Okay, not a problem with sport. I do think that sport's important. Sport and recreation are certainly important. We should take those dollars, we should pull big time sports out of our colleges and universities, push those dollars to sport and recreation for the rest of us. I want you to think very few students are taking up a whole lot of time and not getting an education at our colleges and universities. Next week, I hope that what you'll do is you'll think about how much we're exploiting our sisters, our brothers, our mothers, our fathers, and the people that we love. And for the sake of saying we're helping them and we want to have pride.
All right, Julie, 30 seconds.
So at the end of the day, I really think that there is more value to big time sports at colleges and universities than there are deficits. And I don't want to come up to a space where we end up vilifying an entire program because there are problems. I think that I've already outlined what the positives were. You've heard some back and forth about the positives here. But overall, we really have a program that can contribute to a sense of affinity, not just pride, I think that devalues it, but affinity back to an institution which has an entire net positive effect overall.
All right, audience, it's your turn to help us make a decision here. So we're going to put some house lights up here and hold up your red card if you're Team Ken and your blue card if you're Team Julie.
Ooh. Wow.
This one is very close, but we're going to give it to Team Julie. We're going to give it to Team Julie. Very close, though. How about a nice big round of applause for both Ken and Julie?
Thanks, Ken.
Our next topic. Should community college be free? Let's meet our guests for this debate. Hailing from the birthplace of Jane Addams, Cedarville, Illinois, a graduate of Illinois State University before earning his doctorate at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and currently serving as the Dean of Students at Waubonsee Community College, standing at 6'5" tall with the wingspan of an American bald eagle, a freelance basketball coach for his son's first grade team and a former member of the Illinois State Collegiate Circus, one of just 2 colleges with a collegiate circus in the country. Please welcome Scott Pesca. And on the opposing side, hailing from the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina, earned a master's and PhD from the University of Louisville, and currently serves as the Vice President of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at the Rochester Community and Technical College. He caught the domestic and international travel bug with his current favorite spot being the Netherlands, and is currently in training for a Dancing with the Stars style competition in April. There will be video. Please welcome Michael Anthony. Take it away, Heather.
We will have to talk about this Netherlands thing at some point. I am also a big fan. All right, so Scott, you are our first speaker. You are under the belief that community college should be free, and your 60 seconds begins now.
Well, the concept of free community college is nothing new. Since 1946, the Truman Commission Report on Higher Education provided promoted universal access to education through the 14th grade. Today, with more than 6 out of 10 jobs requiring education at beyond the high school level, it's imperative that we provide members of our society with access to obtaining a post-secondary degree or certificate. It's unfortunate, but today's financial aid, like Pell Grants that go to non-tuition expenses, are getting gobbled up by tuition and fees. A growing response across the nation is these free community college promise programs. Currently, there are over 200 college promise programs in 43 different states. Making college free is essential to expanding access to millions of Americans who can't even afford to start at a community college.
Great, thanks so much, Scott. All right, your opening statement, Michael, you think they shouldn't be free. Your 60 seconds begins now.
Yes, I do not think it should be free. I think it sounds sexy to offer free college, but it is folly at the end of the day. For 3 reasons. 1, it invests in the wrong sector of education, right? We'll talk about that more. 2, it does not help those who need it the most. New York Times and others reported that. Thirdly, it reinforces this very dangerous access mission, as Dr. Pesca just said, at the expense of success, which is a real problem. As a college administrator at 2-year colleges, I had a few now, both in Illinois and in Minnesota, I tend to work with vulnerable students, and the most vulnerable by choice or by my job. And as evidenced by high enrollments in our developmental education courses, students show up and still don't have the college-ready needs that they have. I think we're putting money in the wrong place when that happens, right? I would love to send my daughter in Chicago to a public school. Unfortunately, she's at a private school because of some of the quality in the area she's living in. If we're going to invest more in anything, it should be P-12 education, making sure teachers have good money, making sure that there's equitable experiences for students, and making sure it's not dependent on where you live to fund your K-12 environment.
All right, I have a question for each of you. Scott, my question for you may be obvious. Why stop at 2-year institutions? Why stop at community colleges? Shouldn't 4-year institutions also receive more funding or make it free as well? What's the argument for only extending this to community colleges?
Well, in 2015, Barack Obama shared that universal access to community college should be free for everyone, just as it is high school. And when you think about it, it's the American workforce that is in need of college-educated workers, skilled workers. At one point in time, about a generation ago, we were #1 in producing college graduates. Now we're ranked about 12th. About half of the jobs that are going to be requiring some sort of skill beyond high school, they are requiring an associate's degree or a certificate. So I think focusing on the population of students that, we have about half the students attending higher education that are in community colleges. These are low-income families, first-generation college students. So this is an opportunity to provide these students with a success and to get them into our job market, which a number of our states are working hard and aggressively to try to produce more residents in the states that have a college education.
Right. My question for you, Michael, kind of picks up on something he just said, which is specifically, how do we compete in a global workforce? If people can't afford an advanced degree, how as a society do we make sure that we have the necessary workforce to compete in a global economy?
So I still think there's this a lot of hubris around the 4-year environment, and I'm guilty of it as well, right? Being educated in the 4-year sector first and not having attended 2 years college. But the reality is our workforce, the advanced degrees conversation may not be what the workforce needs. There are certainly needs that there are workforce areas, right? Which goes back to my point where you have to have resources to fund the things you need most. I'm even open to have an opportunity that for the high occupancy workplace workforce jobs. So healthcare, manufacturing, technology, those areas, let's fund that, right? Because we know people can get good paying jobs and they just don't have to do it for 6, 7, 8 years going through getting an advanced degree for jobs that may or may not exist, right? We're not staying nimble enough with that. So we continue to have this conversation about the advanced degree being the future and it's not. And most people, if you're honest with yourselves, most people are not going to be going to college in the first place. So again, we're investing a lot of money in places where it's not maybe serving the greatest good.
Great. We have a question from the audience?
We do. It's coming as we speak. It's a late breaking question. And I didn't even run. All right, so you'll both get an opportunity, 45 seconds, to answer this question. How does your argument relate to the ongoing conversation about higher education being a private good or a public benefit? 45 seconds.
Well, I believe it is a public benefit, and I think that if we look at providing access to free community college, the first argument is promoting access and opening the doors, and this is the next step of looking at the financial burden that so many students have and they're not able to address. I think the argument that Michael Anthony had made about success, if you look at the Tennessee Promise program, in the first year, they had a 17% completion rate or persistence rate greater from those who were part of the Promise program versus those who were not. You're seeing that the enrollments were booming. You had 20% higher enrollment in community colleges, 20% higher enrollment in their technical colleges, and so it definitely increased access. About 90% of all of the graduating seniors in Tennessee were able to apply for this opportunity.
I'm going to argue a couple things. One is it's just not enough. I hear you, Doc, but it's not enough. We have students in my college who are hungry. They don't eat, right? So we're talking about, everywhere is not some of our partners who have the resources to cover these things. So we have these students coming to our college who really need other kind of basic necessities, right? And so this whole notion of it being a public good versus a private good, I'm clearly on a public good side of things, right? College is a public good. The community benefits from it. Community does not benefit from failure. Community does not benefit from people going through the system and getting tax dollars to cover their K-12 education and paying tax dollars again to send them through developmental education, which, by the way, doesn't count towards a degree, right? So students are paying twice, and the community is paying twice in this public good idea for the same thing, and that's unacceptable. And so that's what has to stop, right?
Do we have 30 seconds closing statement? Your time begins now.
So last week I was reading a scholarship application from a student that applied for one of our presidential scholarships. And in her essay she wrote, "For the past 2 years I was working 30 to 40 hours a week while being a full-time student. Although this is incredibly common today, it's not easy." I agree with you, Michael. We have students that are hungry and they have a lot of expenses, and we need to find a way to help ensure that they're going to be able to continue through their education. Free community college provides that access and opens that door for a lot of students.
And your 30-second closing.
While the College for All obsession is noble and uniquely American, I think it's a problem. It can have unintended consequences that I think we're seeing now. It narrows people's options post-high school. The reality is the nature of college is changing. We got an Amazon employee up here. He's going to be taking some of our jobs probably pretty soon. So when they come up with their own university. So there are different ways that the higher education is being delivered. And if we get ourselves boxed into this idea of the free community college, I think it narrows and restricts us and still doesn't focus on getting students through in the best way for them.
All right, audience, we need your help. We're going to bring those lights up. If you are Team Scott, put your red card in the air. And if you are Team Michael, put your blue card in the air. I think it's blue. We're going to give it to blue. Congratulations, Michael. But how about a big round of applause for both of our debaters? Congratulations. Our next topic: should student affairs be a part of academic affairs? Let's meet our guests for this debate. On one side, calling the Big Apple, New York City home, earned his PhD from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a bachelor's and master's from SUNY Albany, currently serves as an executive in residence and building on his 400-day and counting meditation streak. Impressive. He 1 year went on a run for 365 consecutive days and boasts a marathon personal record of 3 hours, 14 minutes. Please welcome Patrick Love. I misspoke. Indiana University, the PhD is from, not of Pennsylvania. My apologies. My sincerest apologies. And on the opposing side, representing his hometown of Stephenville, Texas, also known as the Ville, he earned his PhD with the Bulldogs at the University of Georgia and currently serves as the Dean of the College of Education at Texas State University. When not attending to his 5.5 grandchildren, he enjoys golfing and rereading his childhood science fiction favorites. Please welcome Stan Carpenter. All right, Tony, go ahead and take it away.
All right, it's been 2 years since you two have faced each other in a debate. And I know, Stan, you are still feeling the sting a little bit from a very close vote in the first time around.
Wasn't that close.
Ooh. But Patrick, I have to say in front of a student affairs audience, I think you have your work cut out for you. All right, so Patrick, you've got 60 seconds for your opening statement, beginning now.
There is a chasm that exists between academic and student affairs. And it's reinforced by different languages, different cultures, and different physical contexts. The disconnect has contributed to the fragmentation of the student experience and the challenges we face in trying to obtain the outcomes for our students that we desire. In separate units, it's easy to avoid one another. People won't work with people they don't know. And the way to bridge that cultural gap is to bring both of these sides together. For those who say that without a standalone division of student affairs, students wouldn't matter on campus, miss the obvious fact that our very existence on campus reinforces the notion that the leadership is committed to a holistic student experience. Will it be uncomfortable? Sure. There are going to be new attitudes, characteristics, orientations, and boundaries that are going to make us uncomfortable. But because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Very good. All right, Stan, 60 seconds for your opening argument.
For the past 15 years, I have lived in the rooms where decisions are made for the Academic Affairs Division as a dean and as a department chair. The decisions consider money, they consider state and national politics tied to money, and the present and desired characteristics of faculty and staff. Student success is considered, if at all, only in terms of 1-year retention and 6-year graduation. How these numbers happen, the retention numbers and graduation numbers, is largely a mystery to them. Therefore, why would student affairs wish to report in a division that fails to understand our expertise, our professionalism and professional development, our assessment practices, and anything remotely concerned with the whole student rather than with the cognitive student? We need to partner with academics on a more equal footing than a reporting relationship can afford. We have much to offer they simply don't understand. Certainly they can't succeed. Universities can't succeed without strong academic affairs division, but neither can they succeed without strong and functioning student affairs division.
Very good. All right, Patrick, the first question goes to you. Now, you and I have had conversations about my dislike for the phrase as it relates to student affairs that our work is value added, right? Because I think it relegates us to a less than status. So if academic affairs leadership, as you've proposed, doesn't understand this holistic approach to learning and student success, aren't you concerned that this could lead to a decrease in services and in opportunities for engagement and skill development?
Two things, Tony. What I explain to my students and my staff is I compare it to an operating room. Who's the most important person in an operating room? The surgeon. So let's say the surgeon, student affairs, academic affairs. But would you really want to have surgery without an anesthesiologist? So yeah, we may not be in the center, but we are absolutely vital. The other thing is, and this goes to Stan's point as well, student affairs wasn't in the room when you were talking about student success and retention and graduation rates. I've been in competition with the vice president for academic affairs for resources. I would rather be on the same team arguing together for a holistic student experience.
All right. All right, Stan. So let's say that we keep them separate as you propose, with each having the goal of learning more about each other. So what would compel a faculty member or student affairs professional to taking the time to learn about each other's area? I mean, what would that look like in practice beyond the occasional joint collaborative committee?
Well, to paraphrase Churchill, academic administrators can be counted upon to do the right thing after exhausting every alternative.
Faculty understand and respect expertise that is based on theory, research, and data. We in Student Affairs need to be the go-to people for learning theory and techniques of teaching and learning, for the impact of engagement on student success, for effective use of non-cognitive learning outcomes, among other things. These are common interests with which we can partner with academic affairs. They are things that we can and should be leaders on to help the faculty use their strengths to optimize student success.
Okay, so working at a university that's struggling with this exact argument, how does each side, the student affairs and the academic affairs, define education? And is that interpretation a potential barrier to partnering? You'll both get 45 seconds. We'll start with you, Patrick.
I think it kind of makes my point in that I said that we have different languages, different cultures, and we work in different contexts. And so it's easy not to see how the other half lives from both sides. And so that's why I think we need to be together. That Stan has argued for a holistic notion of student learning, student success. I'm arguing for it, but I'm arguing for something that will enhance the ability to succeed in that quest. And that is to bring people with different language, different expertise, different knowledge into the same context in order to inform one another. Faculty do need what we know, and we can only do it if we're together in the same room.
We can't do it if we're together in the same room because we have different goals, because we have fundamentally different cultures. We need to be separated. We need to be having our own supervision issues. We need to be having our own training, our own kind of expertise, our own research, our own assessment, our own tools, right? That somebody else who doesn't understand it is supervising. We will not ever win if we're in the academic affairs division. We will be shunted down the priority list after every other college in the university. That's simply the way that it is. They don't care about holistic students. They care about retention and graduation, period.
All right, you've got 30 seconds for your closing argument.
What I'm arguing for is less about revolution than evolution. 25 years ago, the Student Learning Imperative was published and began to change the mindsets and perspectives and orientations of the student affairs profession from a sole focus on cognitive and psychosocial development to more about learning, beginning to bridge the gap in terms of being able to talk about learning what, talking to faculty, talking to, whoa, that was a very quick 30 seconds.
All right, 30 seconds begins now.
At a major university last year, the provost was invited to address the Division of Student Affairs at the beginning of a year. She stated her position thusly: "This is the Air Force, and you in Student Affairs are not pilots." That statement sums up the notion of putting utterly different cultures within an artificial reporting relationship. Look, academic affair administrators do not want to deal with the whole student. They don't know how. They don't have the money, the time, or the staff. They shouldn't be supervising those of us who do.
Okay, audience, it's now your turn to help us. We're going to bring the lights off. For Indiana University's finest, Patrick Love, hold your red card up. And for Stan Carpenter, your blue card. Oh, more red than we expected, but we're going to give it to Stan. We're going to give it to Stan. Congratulations. Round of applause for both Stan and Patrick. Our next topic. Should career readiness be a graduation requirement? Let's meet our guests for this debate. Originally from Dallas, Texas, but currently calling Newport, Rhode Island home, earned a PhD at Southern Methodist University, currently serving as the Vice President for Student Affairs and Professor of Anthropology at Salve Regina University. A closet gearhead with plans to attend race school in August when not consulting for the music industry, You may see her around campus with one of her pet goats. Please welcome Barbara Lomanico. And originally from the almond capital of the world, Sacramento, California, earned a master's in theological studies at Texas Christian, has worked at 10 colleges and universities, and wanted to note has never been fired. Currently serving at Monmouth College in Illinois, an avid runner that explores every new city by just taking a run around, and will tell you, and oddly enough, attempted to break into her president's office while an undergraduate to put a goat in there. There's a goat theme going on here. Please welcome Laura Hutchinson. Take it away, Heather.
All right, so great to have you both here today. So we have our opening statements. I think we've got two, yeah. So the first statement is you believe that career readiness should be a graduation requirement. Barbara, you have 60 seconds.
I do believe career readiness should be a graduation requirement. We know that 70% of students are graduating with massive debt. In 1993, only 50% of students were graduating with debt. We know also that parents and students care a great deal about the return on investment of a college education. That's an important factor in shaping their choice. When students graduate, they are underemployed, unprepared, and unable to really talk about the ways that the learning that they've experienced in the curricular and co-curricular world map onto the real world. A recent study by AAC&U demonstrated that 70% of students thought that they were prepared in the workplace, but the employers who interviewed them, only 30% actually found them to be well prepared. Another study also indicated that about 45% of students were working in areas after graduation that didn't even require a college degree.
Okay. 60 seconds begins now, Laura.
Well, I would argue that, well, first of all, 10 years ago, college learning for a new global century made the essential learning outcomes part of the tenet and the baseline of a liberal arts curriculum. That is what we are doing in the liberal arts. It is not an either or. I think the important question here is not how shall I make a living, but how shall I live? A curriculum that has us integrate who we are with what we value, we will get to what we do. But who among us at 18 thought we would end up doing some of the things we are now? Very few, I would argue. And so rather than have this false dichotomy of your education and yet another graduation requirement that asks faculty, not unlike yourself, Barb, to teach to a test, right? That's not working for K-12. It's not going to work for higher education. We have to talk about who we are, what we value, and what our own superpower is. And for me, it is to serve. I would do that whether I was doing this job or something else. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Great. All right, I have questions for each of you. Barbara, so many disciplines require advanced degrees or graduate school. For example, our field, student affairs. What would the career readiness requirement be for those who are going on to graduate preparation programs?
I would argue that Laura's trying to get my goat, first of all, because someone had to say that. Sorry about that. Laura's trying to get my goat. Somebody had to say that. I would say that career preparation isn't career specific. It's a general set of skills that students should experience through 4 years of their education. It should be interlaced very intentionally, very developmentally. And if students are going on to graduate school, I think that career readiness would give us a lot fewer awkward graduate students. That you are really in a career as a graduate student. You're networking, you're learning about presentation of self, lots of important skills, advocating for assistantships. So there are a lot of ways in which thoughtful career readiness is fantastic for graduate school. So it's really not career specific.
Great. So my question for you, Laura, it's really about that, your argument that the good liberal arts education allows somebody to think on their feet effectively and in essence become career ready through these experiential pathways. So how do liberal arts programs prepare students for careers in applied fields like student affairs?
I can appreciate that. I want to go back to those essential learning outcomes that we have been talking about for years, really since pick, college history classes or, how we ever got into this field to begin with. But I would say the liberal arts, again, it's integrated. It does experiential education. It does service learning. It does internships. Many, many students work outside of classes. So this is already taking place. And that does prepare us for practical things, because what we do in the practical world, regardless of what we're actually doing with our hands, is we have to relate to other people. We have to engage with people that are different from ourselves. We do have to think on our feet. We have to live in a world that is full of ambiguous kinds of things that happen to us every day that we can never be prepared for through a career readiness kind of requirement. We just have to live into these important questions because the answers are going to come to us. And so I'm the product of a liberal arts education, and I'm a vice president of freaking student affairs. So I guess I turned out okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I was about to hit the bell, but it was the perfect timing. It ended perfectly.
So perfect. We have a question from the audience?
We do, and this will be for both of you, and we'll start with you, Barbara. We know that everyone plays a part in educating students, but ultimately, where should the responsibility lie for creating an intentional path for employability? Is this a student affairs responsibility or a disciplines responsibility?
Well, thankfully, student affairs isn't reporting to academic affairs yet, but I do think ultimately it should be a shared venture between academic and student affairs. Career development is in my portfolio, and we have created a 4-year, very intentional developmental trajectory for students. And so ensuring that ownership is in student affairs allows us to have some degree of control, but we embed presentations and workshops from faculty into our program, and so it is much more holistic, even though it reports in one place.
Thank you. And now, same question, your 45 seconds, Laura.
I would argue that this is yet again kind of a binary response to something that should be fully integrated. The decision maker that we have left out of this question, although it's a great question, is the student himself, herself, or theirself. And they have as much responsibility in going after their education proactively, in testing out these ideas in a practical way in the world of what do we want to do. But it really, again, I would say comes back down to, I would share your point that it's an integrated thing, but the students have to be part of it. It's not just student affairs. It's not just an academic discipline. It's the student taking on the big ideas and living real conversations about living into those questions. It's not how shall I make a living, it's how shall I live.
Okay. You each have 30 seconds to make your closing statement. So Barbara, yours begins now.
I would say that we shouldn't leave career preparation up to the student, and we shouldn't leave it up to faculty who often believe that that their courses will speak for themselves. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and no one helped me understand the ways in which I could become an anthropologist or a vice president for student affairs. Most importantly, though, students have an awareness gap, and that is they're really unable to make the connection often between their coursework and how that maps onto the world, and career readiness will help them do that and achieve that.
Thanks. Laura, your 30 seconds.
I'm just going to have to go back to liberal arts education. I think it prepared me in so many ways. I did have those critical conversations with my faculty. I did do an internship and discovered that was not how I wanted to serve, but I knew that I wanted to serve. I knew what my sense of purpose was. I knew what my calling was. I mean, we think about the superpower question of, is it the cloak of invisibility? And do you want to know other people's thoughts? Mine, I wanted to heal. And one of the ways that I do that is working with students on a day-to-day basis, working with my staff. I'm a dean of my staff as much as students. And I think that's what it's about for me.
Great. Thank you.
All right, audience, it's now time for you to help us by casting your votes. For Team Barbara, raise your red card, and for Team Laura, raise your blue card. It's very close. Very close, but we're going to go Team Red. We're going to give it to Barbara. How about a nice round of applause for both of our debaters? And our final topic is are social networking sites bad for society? Let's meet our guests for this debate. After George M. Cohan, he is the second most famous resident of Warwick, Rhode Island, earned his doctorate at Johnson & Wales University, currently serves as the Director of Administration at Bridgewater State University. When not busy coaching his daughter's soccer teams, he's training to run his second Boston Marathon this April. A scholar, a Taurus, and a heartbroken New England Patriots fan, please welcome Ed Cabellin. And on the opposing side, originally from Youngstown, Ohio, earned his bachelor's and master's at Kent State University before heading to the University of Florida for his doctorate degree. Had a long commute this morning from his role as the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at Temple University. He's never eaten a banana, once survived a plane crash, and always wins games of 2 truths and a lie. Wait a minute. Please welcome TJ Logan. Take it away, Tony.
All right, I'm a little surprised to see you up on this side of the debate, so I'm not quite sure where you actually stand. I just want to remind folks we've asked people to represent areas for the sake of debate, so you'll have to tell me later where your true thoughts are.
You got it.
All right, you got 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Heather. Thanks, Matt, and Hired Live for the invitation. I appreciate it. You know, after years of research and practice in this space, I'm sad to say that social networks are indeed bad for our society. They are. And deep down, everyone in this audience and online knows why. Certainly, time on social networks has rewired our brains, according to a Journal of Computers and Human Studies behavior, where we're now less attentive, we have less focus, and think about the time you spend away from your family and friends because of it. It has removed those pieces, and even Facebook will admit that its own site is bad. When you look at a University of Missouri study, they look at the fact that the use of Facebook has a direct tie to feelings of depression. So our society is definitely worse off now because of social networks, and I'm sad to say that we have hit this point in our history.
All right. Your opening statement, TJ?
Those are fine points, Dr. Cabellin. In all honesty, there certainly is some bad that comes with the good, but my argument is that the goods of social media in our society far outweighs the bad. And I could give you hundreds of examples, but I really want to focus in on some things that are contemporary and important today. And that's particularly how these platforms give us voice in ways we've probably never had voice before. Think about the Me Too movement as an example. The millions upon millions of online posts. Most of those did not come from celebrities. They came from everyday women that helped to add voice to this issue and help us to understand the magnitude of this issue. That could not have happened without social media. Think about the Never Again campaign that's happening right now. That popped up from 20 high schoolers that were part of something catastrophic. And that was just 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. And look at how large that's become. That wouldn't be possible without social media. And so when you think about the role of social media and giving voice to issues, important issues, I would argue that it's a very, very good thing that we're in a place that we can do that.
All right. So Ed, TJ just talked about the power of social media in regards to activism and social change movements. In a 2016 Pew Research study, 20% of the respondents, 1 in 5, admitted that they had changed their minds about a political issue or a candidate after seeing the issue or candidates discussed on social media. In particular, there was a shifting of views on social issues such as the Black Lives Matter movement, gun control, and LGBTQ rights. So Ed, I know that you have over 10,000 friends combined on Facebook and Twitter. So doing the math, 20% translates to about 2,000 people that you can influence. You can change your minds. Is that such a bad thing?
Tony, I think what's important to understand in this point of our debate is that while yes, there could be and has been some benefit, I would argue that we have lost our way in the sense that now that we're doing that and we're using these platforms, we've lost the contextual ability to really hear and see what the folks are talking about online, right? And that in a snapshot, tweet, Facebook post, yes, there has been benefit, but also there are folks who aren't using their voices because they still can't or don't feel that they can come out and step out because they're not using these platforms. And so I think we got to think about the context that we're either feeling like we're hearing ourselves in a lot of ways in these echo chambers that I believe social networks have become. We're not really listening. We're only taking bits and pieces. And without that context, I fear we're deeper conversation.
Okay. So TJ, Ed is not alone in his thinking. So in 2016, Jules Skelton from the LA Times wrote, social media nurtures short attention spans, the craving for instant gratification, and impersonal barbaric behavior. No time for serious thinking or boning up on substantive issues. A quick stimulating hit of social recognition will suffice. And no need for civility when you're not looking someone in the eye. What's your response to this?
Well, damn. No. Well, in my opening, I talked about the goods with the bads. There is an acknowledgement that there are some bads there, but I think for every article, every study, you could find another study that talks about the positives. I see, Greg Heiberger is sitting really close right there. I saw Josie Alquist earlier. There's a lot of research out there about the positive impacts on student grades, on student engagement, when you put it in the context of our field. The other thing that I would say is, what year did you say that was written?
2016.
2016. So social media years are a lot like dog years, right? And so if you think about it, something written in 2016, that might as well have been written 14 years ago. And the platforms have developed, the context has developed. And as those things have happened, I think we've gotten a whole lot better at that. Around 2016, I actually read a study recently, around that time, cyberbullying numbers were actually down from years prior. And so there's a lot that we have done to develop and evolve around these platforms to get better and better and have better impacts on society as well.
Good.
Okay, we've got a crowd question. You each get 45 seconds. Ed, you'll start. What would need to occur over the next few years regarding social media that would change your mind on this issue?
I mean, I think for me, the thing that would change my mind is our behaviors began to change back. The pendulum swung a little bit more towards the middle. I think we're so far into social media. I mean, many of you right now are either looking down at your phones or tweeting. You're distracted, and your time and your attention are split. And so until I saw human behavior change and shift back to we're talking at dinner the entire time and not having to look at our phone once. Like, to me, that's where things will begin. But until then, I've seen it already in here and in even our own interactions. So to me, it's the human behavior change that would change my mind.
Yeah. So I have a very similar answer. And as I've acknowledged the goods and the bads, I look at social media and social networking sites really as a tool. And they're not inherently good or bad. It's really how we use those. And if the use sways from a place where it is primarily good to a place where it is primarily bad, that would sway me. If Ed posts more gym selfies, that would sway me to think it's very, very bad. No, if it sways to a place where it gets worse, that would definitely sway me to consider them as bad for society.
All right. So you got 30 seconds for your closing statement, beginning now.
Tony, I'm sad to say, but I think we've lost our way as a society. I think social networks have degraded the opportunity for us to have real human interactions, and we've passed that tipping point. And so we are distracted. We have to admit that. Our mental health is suffering because of this. And our family and friendships are also deteriorating if you really think about how your life is different now because of social networks. And I think the Justice did a great job today by illustrating exactly what we need to do. We need to stand up. We need to get out from behind our screens, and we need to go out and see one another.
All right.
It's very dramatic.
DJ, 30 seconds.
So I want to bring it back home. We're in a room full of student affairs practitioners, and when we think about the use of social networking in our context, as I said, there's a lot of research about the positives of those things, but I think it goes even further than that. I think the use of these technologies has a major impact, and I think somebody actually said it better than I could. I don't want to mess up this quote, so I'd actually like to put it up if we can. And the quote says, "Student affairs administrators' strategic use of digital technology is the key to supporting the Academy's ongoing online evolution." I can't remember who said that, but yeah, that's right. That was Ed Cabellin that said that. So I rest my case.
That's low, bro. That's low, bro.
We all can be bought, Ed. Sorry. Audience, red card for Team Ed, blue card for Team TJ. Let's see them. And the Blues have it. Congratulations, TJ. Let's hear it for Ed and TJ. And how about a big round of applause for all of our debaters today? While these debates may be over, the conversation should continue. All of our participants are encouraged you to partake in regular healthy discourse. The future and strength of our field depends on it. We'd like to thank you so much for joining us for this very special edition of Higher Ed Live here at NASPA in beautiful Philadelphia. Let's hear it for our moderators today for Contested Issues Live Debates and your hosts of Higher Ed Live, Tony and Heather. Remember that you can watch this or any episode at higheredlive.com. You can join Tony on March 28th for an interview with Sarah Goldrick-Robb, author of the book Paying the Price: College Costs, Financial Aid, and the Betrayal of the American Dream. And you can join Heather on April 4th with the authors of the 3rd edition of the book, How College Affects Students. Well, folks, that's all the time we have today. For those of you tuning in online, have a great one and enjoy your Monday. For those of you here in Philadelphia, get out there, grab a Wawa coffee with a tasty cake, enjoy a cheesesteak from my favorite spot, Tony Luke's. For Higher Ed Live, I'm Matt Ferguson. Thanks for joining us.